Hello and welcome to Arkansas Week. I'm Karen Walker. Creating tasty, nutritious meals on a budget may seem challenging, but actually it's easier than you think. Later in the program, we'll have a nutritionist and a master chef to offer tips on how to make a meal straight from your kitchen cabinet. But first, we begin with a new study revealing that nearly 30% of adult Arkansans, that's 688,000, are food insecure, according to findings from the Arkansas Health Survey. Joining me today to talk about that, how the data was collected and the impact on families and communities, is Dr. Michael Niño, Principal Investigator of the Arkansas Health Survey and Associate Professor of Sociology and Criminology at the University of Arkansas. Welcome to the program, Dr. Niño.
Thanks for having me, Karen. I appreciate it.
Arkansas is the second state to conduct an in-depth study focusing on health, with California being the first. So can you tell us about the Arkansas Health Study Project and how it came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'll take the second part of this question first and really focus on why we decided to pursue this survey. A few years ago, we really decided to really think about what it would look like to meaningfully understand and address health disparities in the state of Arkansas and clear and quickly recognize that we didn't have the public health data infrastructure in the state to meaningfully understand and address disparities in health throughout the state. So, to address this critical public health need, we created the Arkansas Health Survey. The survey is a large population multi-mode survey, so both web and mail, to approximately 10,000 resident adults in the state of Arkansas. So the way that we collected these data is we sent out 70,000 mailed invitations up to 4 times to all potential respondents. So in the first 2 mailed invitations, all 70,000 potential respondents received an invitation. And then folks in the southern counties and in Pulaski County in northwest Arkansas, if they hadn't responded to those first 2 invitations, received 2 more. We decided to focus on the southern counties in the latter rounds because we were seeing low response rates in those particular areas, and then also wanted to focus on the population centers in Pulaski County and northwest Arkansas. Once we were done with data collection, we had a final sample of 9,932 adult Arkansans in all 75 counties. Those are complete responses, and they're weighted to the population. So they're representative of the state, making the Arkansas Health Survey the largest population health survey in the state's history.
So what did the survey reveal about food insecurity?
It's a great question. So, what we found in the survey is that almost 29% of Arkansans at the time of the interview were food insecure. And several folks have asked us, how we were able to assess food insecurity. And so I think it's important to note that we use the 6 item short form module of food insecurity from the USDA in the survey. So that included 6 questions that really assessed whether or not folks had food to eat, could afford balanced meals, cut meals, uh, decided not to eat even when they were hungry. And that particular score ranged from 0 to 6. And if folks scored between 2 and 4, they were considered low food security. And then 5 and 6, very low food security. So when you look at that in particular, and in that higher category of 5 and 6, there are approximately 16% of Arkansans that scored in that higher range of very low food security, right? So when you combine both the low food security and very low, it's approximately 29%. But even when you look within it, right, there's 16% of Arkansans that have very low food insecurity, meaning that they're skipping meals, they didn't eat, they can't afford balanced meals, and they're not eating even when they're hungry, right? So just it really kind of encapsulates the full range of behaviors in food insecurity and demonstrates a deep need in the state.
Well, with food insecurity affecting approximately 688,000 adults across the state, how is it impacting our children and our communities?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when we look at the data, especially in households with children, a particular population that we really are thinking hard about are households where there's a single adult and with children, and they live 200% below the federal poverty line. And what we're seeing is that over half of adults that are single and have children that live below the poverty line are food insecure, right? So, this particular population is a population that we're thinking about a lot. Beyond that, when you begin to start looking at communities more broadly, there are 133 census tracts where over 40% of residents are food insecure. So, census tracts are essentially function like a neighborhood. They're smaller than counties. We have 823 throughout the state, and of that 823, 133 of them have over 40% of their residents that are food insecure. And those tracks are spread throughout Arkansas. So they're not concentrated in a particular region. We see them in both urban and rural areas. Um, and, um, and they really are kind of distributed throughout the state.
How does the availability of food resources differ between urban and rural areas across the state?
So that's a really great question, right? So when you look at access to resources for food, um, and this probably doesn't come as a surprise to most people, access is mostly concentrated in population centers. So if you look at isolated rural tracts in Arkansas, so these are tracts where people rarely leave. They don't commute out of them. They work, live, and play in these areas. There are very few grocery stores. There are very few pantries, and so in these areas that are deeply isolated, oftentimes we see very few resources and access to food in those areas.
Yes. Well, we have a map, the state map of Arkansas's health survey results by county and by census tract. Can you explain each one for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 75 counties in the state. And within those 75 counties, we have 823 census tracts. And those census tracts are smaller geospatial units that really provide much more meaningful nuance around where disadvantage or need is concentrated, right? So you might see a county like, for instance, Union County, it's really deep red. But when you dig into the county and look within the county, it's actually just a few census tracts that are driving most of that need, right? So when we're really thinking about programs and what this helps us do is really begin to think more in a targeted way around where we should focus our attention and who lives in these particular areas so we can better address the needs of those particular residents.
Yeah, thank you for that. And seeing the map too helps us to really understand better some of the survey results. So, food insecurity can influence our health. What other health indicators did the survey show?
So we included a range of health indicators in the survey. We included, for instance, 16 different chronic conditions, things like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, high blood sugar, osteoporosis. So this is like bone loss. We also included other indicators on behavioral health, like depression and loneliness and smoking and hazard or tobacco use and hazardous alcohol use. And so, what we'll be able to do moving forward is really begin to understand at an individual level what the different social mechanisms are driving different health outcomes differently, right? So, it'll provide a much more nuanced picture of health in the state and the different mechanisms that are driving different health outcomes within and across counties in Arkansas. So, we will be able to tell a much more nuanced story about health and health disparities in the state and the different drivers of these disparities across Arkansas.
Well, with the United States Department of Agriculture announcing the termination of its food security report last year, are there plans in place to continue tracking food insecurity as well as other health trends with the Arkansas Health Survey?
That's a great question. So the Arkansas Health Survey was designed to be administered annually. And so, yes, we will be really one of two states that are able to provide meaningful information on food insecurity to the citizens of Arkansas moving forward. So, California and Arkansas are the only two states that have a survey of this magnitude. And both our surveys include that short form module on food insecurity in the survey. But what's also important to note is that we are working with community organizations throughout the state and asking them what they would like to see in the survey. And so we're working with the food banks and really thinking about beyond that short form module, what are some other questions you would like to see in the survey? What are the people that you're working with on the ground on a daily basis? Your neighbors, the friends, right? The people that you love. What are they telling you about food and access to food? And how can we help capture some of that at a population level so we can better tell that story of food insecurity in the state moving forward?
That's great. As we wrap up, I have a quick question for you, and you may have said it, but can you tell us again, how are you going to use that data that's been collected from the health survey?
Great question. So, I work at the University of Arkansas. We're a land grant institution. I was trained at land grant institutions. The life I have today is the result of a land grant institution. And we really believe in the mission of providing public goods to the citizens of this state. And so we plan to give these data away, right, through an interactive dashboard. So here in a few weeks, we'll release the dashboard. And it will provide all of those maps that you just saw, not just for food insecurity, but 26 other indicators from the Arkansas Health Survey, along with 12 other indicators from the American Community Survey. And folks, anyone will be able to use this interactive dashboard to really begin to understand where is prevalence concentrated in the state, where they see that high prevalence, who lives in these areas, what do we see when we're looking at Medicaid and SNAP and poverty, et cetera, so that we can help community organizations, policymakers, and just the citizens of this state help better understand what is happening in their communities so we can really begin to organize to meaningfully reduce disparities in health and social disadvantage in the state of Arkansas.
Thank you so much, Dr. Niño. That is amazing what's going to come of this study. So thank you again, Dr. Michael Niño, Principal Investigator of the Arkansas Health Survey. Stay tuned. Up next, we'll hear from a master chef and nutritionist on how to create tasty meals right out of your kitchen cabinet. Welcome back. Here to share with us on how to be creative and affordable in preparing delicious meals from our kitchen are Alyssa Frisby, a registered dietitian and nutritionist from the Culinary Medicine program at UAMS, and Dr. Robert Hall, master chef and instructor at the University of Arkansas Pulaski Technical College. Now, on the previous segment, we were talking about food insecurity and access and to resources for food. So I wanted to ask you, what strategies do you recommend for individuals that's on the very low incomes and maybe rely on food pantries or dollar stores?
Creativity with whatever you can get. I think the main strategy, and one of my soapbox topics, is experiment in the kitchen. Cook anything. Cook anything. It doesn't, when you're learning, It doesn't matter what ingredients you have available to you, use them and do something with your own hands. Gather your kids, your family together, spend some time in the kitchen, and just do something.
Well, is it possible to eat healthy without having expensive foods?
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely. I think identifying the sources of those important nutrients in food is really important, and finding out where you can get those at resources that are available. So maybe it's a food pantry and you're getting things like dried beans and rice, or maybe it's a dollar type store where you may have a limited pantry section, but you're able to identify things like pastas and some shelf-stable canned goods that you can keep for a little while. They're often inexpensive, and figuring out ways to use those creatively in your different meals and kind of stretch the budget a little bit. I think that just knowing what those healthy foods are, and then, like Chef Hall said, how to cook them and make them taste good, are going to go a long way in really stretching your resources.
Yes, that sounds good. Well, tell me this, Dr. Hall, what myths would you like to debunk for beginner cookers, people who are beginning to cook? What myths can you debunk for us?
So I think the first myth is healthy food is limited to what a rabbit eats. You know, we use the term rabbit food. I built my career, like most chefs, I built my career in the restaurant world. And our bodies require some fat, some sugar, some salt. But eating just restaurant food, going through the drive-through, you're loading yourself with sugar, fat, and salt. When you cook at home, starting with anything, you're in control of especially those three things. Your body needs them, but in the right way. And so a little bit of education, and there's programming on this channel that is geared to teaching that, providing that education. But again, if you just get your hands dirty, if you make chicken nuggets at home from a chicken breast, whether that came from your backyard, that came from the pantry, the food pantry, you pick that up from a dollar store or wherever you got that chicken breast, that is 100 times healthier than buying the chicken nuggets or the chicken strips from your local restaurant.
Yes, I loved when you said about having that idea that it's rabbit food when our bodies need a variety of things. Alyssa, can you tell us, how do you get on the path to eating better?
It starts small. It's not something that you should decide to do a complete overhaul of your diet and that you have to eat these rabbit foods or that you have to be limiting. It's really identifying different foods that you might be lacking in your regular diet. Maybe that's fruits or vegetables or whole grains or an adequate source of protein. And then making decisions about trying to incorporate that at a meal or two each week, maybe a veggie every single day, and starting small and really growing those habits so that you don't get overwhelmed. Thinking about eating healthy, especially on a budget, especially when your resources are limited, can be really, really overwhelming. So just start small. Figure out things that you can actually do, set goals that are attainable, and start there, and it can make a much bigger impact on your overall health.
Yes, thank you. So what misconceptions do we have about eating healthier?
I think that it's expensive. We kind of touched on that a little bit, that it has to be only organic, has to be only fresh, and that it has to have a lot of limitations in order to be healthy. But really, you can start with things that are canned, things that are frozen, things that are shelf stable, and adding them in. In our program at UAMS, we really focus on what can you add to your plate to make it healthier. more so than what do you have to start taking away from your diet. And I think just that basic education that Chef Paul mentioned, that we do want to eat a variety of foods. We do want to get our carbohydrates, our fats, our protein in at meals and snacks. I think knowing that balance and a balanced plate is the way to go is something that can be really helpful and kind of take some of the pressure and stress off of what is healthy eating.
I think a misconception also is that healthy food is nasty. Healthy food don't taste good.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have to go to culinary school to make nutritious food delicious. And whether we call it rabbit food or not, healthy food is not limited to just what goes in a salad bowl. We will eat healthier. The state of Arkansas will be healthier if we spend more time in the kitchen. If everyone set a goal to cook a meal from scratch, one meal a week, more than you already do. If you don't do any, cook one meal a week. If it's breakfast, pack your own lunch before work. A dinner, make one meal a week more than you do now from scratch at home, and you're taking those little steps. It can be a big, daunting world. I've cooked professionally for almost 40 years. That's not required. That kind of experience, that kind of, it's not required.
That's wonderful. So what are some of the staples that we need to have in our kitchen cabinet in order to make delicious, healthy meals?
A favorite herb, a favorite seasoning. Dry herbs will last a long time in your pantry. There are lots of seasonings that taste really, really good that aren't loaded in salt, but yet some salt's okay.
Okay.
We have to have salt,
Yeah,
right?
you
have to have it. I would start there. I don't really care for broccoli, but then they're just plain broccoli, chewing on broccoli, put broccoli in the salad. But there are 1,000 things you can do with broccoli, and it's a completely different vegetable if you add a little this seasoning or that seasoning while you saute it or you steam it. Start with the spice cabinet.
That sounds like a winner. Now, both of you are home chefs. Tell me, what's your go-to dinner that you make?
So even I've got two little grandbabies, actually a 4-year-old and a 5-month-old. And my grandpa name is Poppy, in part because my favorite fruit is popcorn. So my go-to at home is popcorn.
What about you for dinner?
Mine's a little bit more of a balanced plate. I'm usually a source of protein, a vegetable, and a starchy food kind of person, and mixing that up a couple nights a week. So I'll do a chicken breast and I'll make a pan sauce. That is probably one of the most fun things that I've learned about cooking is just making a different sauce. Usually you can make it out of, what comes off of a chicken breast in a pan and a little bit of seasoning, but something to just kind of dress up a basic protein a little bit. And then I really like roasted vegetables. I think it imparts a lot of flavor without having to add a lot of salt. And then something like a potato, a sweet potato, beans, rice, just something simple that keeps me feeling full, has a little bit of color on the plate, and feels really balanced. And my pantry staple is beans. I know you have your favorites, but you can do so much with a can of beans, and you can add it to some tomatoes and eggs and have a great breakfast. It can be a staple in a chili for dinner, but it's something that keeps for a really long time. Requires very little prep if you're using a can. You may need a day's notice if you're using dried beans, but you can blend them, add some volume to your pasta sauces. There's so many things you can do with beans. They're a great source of fiber. They have protein. They're a complex carbohydrate. That's one of my go-tos right now.
Well, I love it. Well, as we're wrapping up, you two are going to be on the new cooking show, Arkansas Taste Kitchen. Tell us, what do you want people to get from that show? What do you want them to learn or walk away with?
Oh, well, I think one of those things we've already said, maybe two things. nutritious is delicious.
Oh, I like
And I
that.
think we really do show that. And I hope that what we are doing inspires people to spend a little more time in the kitchen. We break down what a lot of people think is cooking is scary. It's complex. It's really not. It doesn't take hours.
No.
And so hopefully that's what we're accomplishing, inspiring people to step in the kitchen, explore.
Yeah.
I love it. Go ahead,
And for me,
Alyssa.
thank you. For me, it's that we get to show what it means to make a healthy plate. We're not just telling people eat those complex carbohydrates and get your fruits and veggies in. It's here's a recipe that we're using broccoli for. If you don't like broccoli, here's a couple practical substitutions you can make. So I love that we get to work through that together, talk about it, in less than 25 minutes on the show, and we can create multiple recipes from start to finish and show how easy it is to make these practical changes so you can have a healthier diet.
Wow, I love it. And they'll be able to watch right here on Arkansas TV. So thank you, Alyssa Frisby, and nutritionist for the UAMS Culinary Medicine program. And thank you, Chef Dr. Robert Hall, Master Chef and Instructor at the University of Arkansas Pulaski Technical College. This
Thank you.
concludes our program, and I'll see you next time.